Good evening. Tonight's live is going to be about dahlias. It's almost time for me to start planting in my Charlotte, North Carolina backyard garden. And this will be my third year growing dahlias, and I have learned a lot in those 3 years, but I am by no means an expert. A little bit later in the video, I'm going to give you 2 accounts that I follow in terms of all things dahlia, especially growing them, propagating them, saving seeds, all of those things. I'll tell you about that in just a minute. The whole point of going on tonight is to discuss a couple different ways of getting your dahlia tubers ready to plant and actually planting them out. As I said, I've been growing, this will be my 3rd year growing dahlias. I was hooked after joining Instagram during quarantine and seeing all the dahlias. I had heard of black dahlia because of that murder, but I was not familiar with dahlias as flowers, and I typically didn't grow flowers in my backyard garden. I grew all vegetables. Well, enter Instagram 2020, and I decided dahlias were of interest to me. I purchased some specialty tubers that cost a lot of money, some of which never grew. And I also purchased tubers from places like Costco and Lowe's, and some of those, actually the ones from Costco, had crown gall, and I reached out to the company and they replaced those tubers. That was Longfield. And I've had issues with specialty tubers like rotting or not having eyes. So you roll the dice no matter where you buy from, unless you have found some of those very special dahlia suppliers that you trust, and every year that you order from them, you get quality tubers and then you stick with them. What I'm going to tell you guys about today is the difference between potting up and waking up dahlia tubers for taking cuttings. You may be seeing on Instagram people having trays of tubers, and they're not fully buried, and this looks a little bit odd. Like, why would you do this 10-20 tray full of soil and put the tubers kind of on the top? And the reason people do trays like this is to be able to take cuttings, meaning they want another dahlia that's completely identical to that tuber dahlia. And so they're going to let it sprout. They're going to chop off the sprout. And then there's several different ways to do this. They're going to pot up the sprout so that it forms roots and you have a whole other dahlia plant. So this is a great way to buy a couple specialty tubers and then have a bunch more. So instead of buying 10 cafe au lait tubers, you buy a couple, you put them in a cutting bed like this, and then when they sprout, you can take the cutting, you can cut this off the tuber, and you can pot it up and have another plant. A lot of questions, let's go ahead and pull this guy out, just look at him. A lot of questions you get is, all right, if you wiggle this sprout off, bloop, is this tuber now trash? No. And it also goes for if it was just a single tuber, like, do I have one in here? Here. Even if the sprout is coming off of a single tuber, if you remove it, there will form other sprouts around where that one was. So the tuber is not trash. It can still be planted. It's still going to turn into a big dahlia plant. But with a little luck, this tiny cutting is going to form its own roots and be an entirely identical and own dahlia plant. So I have one going. I'm probably going to only take a couple cuttings this year because I was very happy with the way my dahlias stored over winter. I left some in the ground because I'm zone 7B. I left some in the ground, not mulched, and they're already sprouting out of the soil. And then the other ones, I dug them up. I left them dirty. I probably trimmed the roots. And then I took a shoebox that I filled with vermiculite. I popped them in, I shut the lid, and I put them in my unheated garage to just chill out for the winter. This is not, No one will tell you to store dahlias like this, and I'm not either. I'm just saying this is what I did, and it turned out okay. Speaking of no one will tell you, let me give you 2 dahlia resources that have been extremely helpful in my dahlia growing journey. The first is Christine Albrecht from Santa Cruz Dahlias. She is, I think a lot of people would consider her like the head person when it comes to dahlias. And she takes the time to put out very thoughtful and helpful videos all the time. If you go to her Instagram, she even has a guide with categorized videos. So videos about taking cuttings, videos about planting out, all of that. The other resource that I really love is Garden Bee Flower Farm on Instagram, Paula Fisher. She takes the time to provide educational information and videos. She also has a website that is extremely valuable. So if you are wanting to learn more about growing dahlias, propagating dahlias, saving seed, growing from seed, all of that, I recommend following those 2 accounts. Okay, so what I wanted to show you the main thing I wanted to show you guys tonight is not to tell you how to do anything, but it's to show you that dahlia tubers, dahlia cultivars are so different in terms of when they wake up that you might think, this dahlia tuber is doing nothing, it's worthless, and throw it in the trash. And I want to show you the difference. This entire tray, they were all put in here on the exact same date. There go my notes. All right, this is the one I just pulled up that had oh no. So now I've lost the cutting I just took. Okay, oh well. All right, this one had the sprout on it that I just wiggled off. And you can see the tubers are starting to form some roots. All right, then there's a clump like this that doesn't look like it's doing anything until you look very carefully. Can I get my screen to focus? Right there. A tiny little sprout is forming. A lot of these tubers I chose not to divide because when I dug them up in the fall, I could not see the eyes and I was too nervous. So I just decided to leave them as is. All right, where's another one with a sprout? Here we go. All right, this guy has some sprouts on it, but the tubers haven't really started forming roots yet. Here's another one. No roots, but one little sprout. So the point of me showing you this is that you can have some tubers waking up with sprouts on them. Like I pulled this one off of one. That one's huge. And then you can have other ones that don't look like they're doing anything. So give them time and don't throw them out thinking that because the other ones have sprouted that these aren't going to. There's definitely still a chance. All right. Oh, I found it. There we go. Okay, so this is how people, this is one way that people wake up their dahlias to be able to take cuttings to create more identical dahlia plants. All right. Something else you'll see or hear people talking about, let me get this out of the way. Is something called potting up your dahlia. Okay, this is Robin Hood. This dahlia tuber was put in this container on March 4th, and I filled the container to about here with soil. I put a single tuber in, and then I filled it all the way to the top with soil. So there is no tuber showing. The point of doing this for me is that it's giving my dahlias a head start. So I won't be taking cuttings. I'm not getting additional plants from doing this. The reason for this is that when I plant this out, as opposed to being at this stage where there's the tiniest little sprout, when I'm planting this one out, it's going to be a 4-inch, 6-inch, whenever I decide to do it, relatively established dahlia. That's giving it a little bit of a head start, a jump in terms of when it'll start blooming. So that is the reason why you'll see people potting up. That's just to get a head start and hopefully get blooms sooner. There's probably other reasons why you do it, but it's very different from when you see someone, and you'll also see people, you might see people pot up dahlias like this, or with even more of the tubers sticking out. This one has two shoots on it. This one just didn't fit in the container. I couldn't get it down far enough. But you'll also see people planting their tubers like this, and that is usually when part of the tuber is sticking out of the top, that's usually to take cuttings. Okay. So remember, I am a home hobby gardener. I don't sell tubers. I am not a cut flower farmer. So that the things I do are not necessarily me telling you like, this is the way to do it. This is going to guarantee success. It's just me talking to you and sharing with you what I'm doing, what's working, what's not working. So take that with a grain of salt. In terms of planting out, I don't usually plant my dahlias out until after my last frost date. However, my last frost date is April 15th, and I have looked at the 15-day forecast, and we don't have any nights below 42. So I feel comfortable planting out some of my dahlias, and I will probably go ahead and start planting out some of these tubers in the backyard, because the tubers that I left in the ground, they've already sprouted and they're doing just fine. I could cover them if I had to, if we had a questionable night. When I go to plant this out, even though it is already sprouted, I'm still going to bury it the depth that I want to plant it. People say different depths, so I'm not going to recommend one. I'll probably plant this 4 inches. But when I plant this, I will cover it completely with soil, 4 inches of soil, even though it already has a sprout. I'm not going to let this part stick up above the soil. It's going to be underneath the soil. I'll plant it with some insect frass, plant food when I do that, and that's it. I'll also put a stake in or some type of support system when I plant, and the label, because I don't want to go back afterwards and not quite remember where it is and stick something in the ground and have it spear the tuber, which could then make it susceptible to rot. So I'll dig a hole, add some insect frass, plant this 4 to 6 inches deep, even though it already has a sprout. This will continue to grow up above the soil. I will put in my label and I will have my support system. This year I am testing out T-posts with the plastic Hortanova netting. Don't love using plastic, don't love purchasing it. I do plan to use it year after year if possible. And I found that using string last year, even nylon, special twine, I didn't have the greatest success supporting my dahlias, and some of my dahlias were 12 feet tall because I have a lot of shade. They were reaching for the sun. So I definitely need a really good support system in place. All right. Yeah, so I think I'm probably gonna plant some of these tomorrow just to get going. But all the ones that I've brought in here, they have started. Remember, the tuber's planted down about here. So it has done that much growth and gone up above the soil. I have several outside in pots like these that have not emerged, and that's okay, because remember, the tubers are going to start sprouting at different times. All right, so I am going to propagate this, and to do so, I'm going to remove the lower leaf node covers, the material that's covering these leaf nodes. I'm even going to take this one off. And I could put it in rooting hormone. I've done that before. You don't always need it. This one, well, we don't know if there are roots yet, but I did not use rooting hormone. And then I'm going to just stick it. I'm just doing this until after we get off the live and I can get a pot of soil and put it in its own pot. But that's it. I'm just going to pop it in the soil. I'm going to keep it watered. I'm going to put it under the grow lights. Some people, when they're propagating, they keep they keep these under humidity domes until they form roots, which is what I've done in the past. I'm feeling lazy. I don't know. I'm looking over at my humidity dome right now. Okay. I just wanted to show you this. If you choose to do propagation, and it could be anything, it could be hydrangeas or dahlias or zinnias or snapdragons or sweet peas, by taking cuttings, sometimes it is good to have a humidity dome. And I do like the tall humidity domes for when you're taking cuttings because it gives you that extra room. I have the 2.5 inch short humidity domes, and I have one of these tall ones, and that is what I use for propagating, taking cuttings, keeping them in the right environment. This one, I think this one is called a 6 inch. This one's from Bootstrap Farmer. I think it's called a 6 inch. And then the shorter ones, and when you go to shop there, it defaults to the 6 inch. Make sure if you don't want the tall one to click the drop down menu and select the 2.5 inch one, because this takes up a lot of space on your grow racks. And if you don't need the 6 inches, get the shorter one. That is it for what I wanted to say. Let me pull you closer and see if there's any questions I can answer. There are no questions in the question bubble. If you have something you want me to not miss and to definitely answer, put it in the question bubble, which you can find below. Otherwise, I'm gonna go scroll back. And remember, again, I'm a home hobby gardener. I am not your go-to resource for all things dahlia. This is my 3rd season growing, and if you do need advice, check out Instagram, Santa Cruz Dahlias, and Garden Bee Flower Farm. No sound? Y'all, is there sound? Did I just talk that whole time? I hope not. Or maybe that person was just messing with me. I don't know. There's so many glitches these days with Instagram Lives, especially if you do it with someone else, and then Instagram overlays the audio on top of each other. And then sometimes the sound is not there. Sometimes it goes out. It glitches. There is sound. I can hear you. Thank you. I got really nervous that I just talked for 30 minutes to no one. Okay. There wasn't at first. I wonder what I was talking about that may not have been caught on camera. Thanks a lot, Instagram. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions. And with that, I think we will say goodnight and happy dahlia growing. Real quick, let's see. Places I've purchased dahlias from before that I recommend. I'm gonna forget some. Arrowhead, Garden Bee Flower Farm. There's like 5 that Dahlias by Julia. No, Dahlias by Julie. I'm frustrated. Mayberry Blooms. But I do recommend, if it is your first year growing dahlias, don't hesitate to pick up some from Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, Costco, Aldi, Lidl. Check them first, make sure they look relatively normal. If they have crown gall or crown gall, they're gonna look like a cauliflower formation with like way too many sprouts forming. And then maybe plant them in grow bags, because that will keep them relatively isolated from any specialty tubers that you have. I grew a lot of dahlias in grow bags. I used the 7-gallon. They did great. Yeah, don't hesitate to try the big box stores. Make all your mistakes on the inexpensive tubers. And then when you feel like, okay, I've got this down, I know how to support my dahlias. I know how much water they want. I know how to fertilize them. I know how to store them over the winter if I do that. Then start looking into some of the ones I mentioned: Arrowhead, Mayberry, Dahlias by Julie, Garden Bee Flower Farm, Barn Dog Flower Blooms, I think is another one. Look into those companies and support those small businesses with the more expensive specialty tubers. Things I learned my first and second year growing. There's a lot of conflicting information on the internet about dahlia fertilization. I read that they don't want any fertilizer or they don't want any nitrogen. That wasn't the case. They could have used a little help, especially because they were in grow bags. This year I will be using insect frass fertilizer. It's a very low MPK, and it's a long continuous feed as opposed to like a jolt to the system or shoving sugar down their throat. Other things I learned: water. I did not, because they were in grow bags, they needed watering a lot. I didn't set up any type of irrigation system. And if I go out of town and I have others in grow bags, I'll use those terracotta spikes called plant nannies with a empty wine bottle filled with water. I'll put those in the grow bags to help them along. Maybe I'll even move them in, if they're not too big, into the garage so they don't get too dried out while I'm gone out of town. But the water was a big issue. Staking, figuring out a staking system that works for me. I've also tried just putting in like the really tall tomato stakes, the plastic covered metal stakes in the ground, the poles. And that was a lot of work to continuously tie the dahlia up to that. So I've tried several different ways. The one I like the best so far is the really tall tomato cage from Forever Garden Bed. And I'm going to try the Hortanova netting this year and see if that helps. Suggestions on thinning when planting by seed. That's interesting. I don't ever direct sow dahlia seeds. I start them, let me show you. Recently, it's empty now. So I take one of these empty food containers and I fill it with soil and I just scatter a bunch of dahlia seeds in, and then I cover it with soil and I see what sprouts, because sometimes you can have issues with getting dahlia seeds to germinate, especially the fully double or the double decorative dahlias sometimes only have 30% germination rate on their seeds. So I throw a bunch in something like this. If they germinate, I then carefully pick them out and pot them up. I have never direct sown a dahlia seed. I'm not sure why. I don't have a good reason. I just haven't. I think also a lot of people, especially when you're working with a tuber where you can't identify an eye, instead of taking up space in your garden and planting it out and like crossing your fingers, if you pot it up and it sprouts, okay, this one is good to go. I can plant it out. It's going to be worth the garden space, and you feel good about it. So that's another reason to wake up your dahlia tubers, is just to make sure that they have an eye. There's 3 things a dahlia needs to grow. They need a tuber, which is their food source. They need an intact neck. So you don't want like a floppy, even this one's even bordering on a little floppy. You want an intact neck, and you need an eye, which is where your sprout will grow. And it's very hard sometimes to identify those eyes. So waking up your dahlias will help you know if you have a viable tuber that's going to turn into a plant. And remember, if you wake up your tubers and you accidentally do something like this, oh no! See how I broke that sprout off? It's okay. Around where that sprout was, new sprouts will form. So it's okay to take cuttings. It's okay to accidentally break them off. More sprouts, more eyes will form as long as there was that one original viable eye. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the question bubble. Thank you guys for hanging out with me on a Tuesday night, talking dahlias. Sorry, reading through the comments. No, sexual CR 69, you may not be in the video because your name is creepy and I also don't know you. Okay, that's it. You guys have a great evening. It was fun chatting.